Welcome to Crushed Husband. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. It had been a brutal 12 hours. I pulled my truck into the driveway of 2847 Maple Street, the tires scraping against the gravel, feeling the weight of the day finally start to lift off my shoulders. Construction work was always grueling, but today had been especially exhausting. All I wanted was a hot shower and a quiet evening. As I climbed out of the truck, I heard the familiar sound of Lois Draper's voice. She was standing at her mailbox, as usual, staring across the street at me with that same prying expression she always had. "Braxton," she called, a little too loudly for my liking. "I hope everything's all right in there. I heard some disturbing noises earlier." I froze for a second, my hand on the door of my truck. "What?" Lois was a nice enough neighbor, but she always had a way of sticking her nose where it didn't belong. I gave her a half smile, trying to brush it off. "What do you mean, Lois?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She took a few steps closer, lowering her voice. "I don't know, like screams, cries, prolonged, like something was wrong." She paused and then added, "But I didn't hear anything after that, so I wasn't sure if I should call someone." I felt a chill run through me. There was nothing I could think of that would explain strange noises like that. Nothing at least that should be happening. My stomach twisted. "No need to worry," I said, forcing the words out, though the unease in my chest was growing. "Delaney and I are fine. It's just a rough week at work, you know." I gave her what I hoped looked like a reassuring smile. Lois seemed to buy it because she nodded and waved, heading back into her house. I let out a slow breath, but the weight in my chest didn't ease. The house felt quieter than usual when I stepped inside. The silence was unnerving, like something was out of place. It wasn't the kind of quiet that came from a peaceful evening after work. It felt empty. Delaney, my wife, wasn't here. "Delaney?" I called, stepping into the entryway. No answer. I was used to hearing the TV running or the faint sound of her moving around the house. But there was nothing. I took a few slow steps through the living room, my boots clicking on the hardwood floor. The house felt different, strangely off. My eyes drifted to the hallway, toward the bedroom. The door was cracked open, and I could see the disarray inside. Delaney was usually the tidy one, always had things in order. But now, the bed was left half-made, and clothes were scattered across the floor, something that never happened unless something was wrong. I walked down the hall, the feeling of dread growing with every step. The jewelry box she always left on the dresser was empty. I could barely swallow the knot in my throat. Where was she? The box had been full just this morning. I scanned the room, hoping to find some sign, something to explain the strange emptiness. That's when I noticed it. A small, blinking light on the guest room nightstand, a voice recorder. It was odd. It had never been there before. I picked it up, hesitating for only a moment before pressing play. A voice filled the room, Delaney's voice. But it wasn't the one I knew. There was a coldness to it, a casual ruthlessness that made my stomach churn. "I can't keep this up anymore," Delaney said, the words clipped and deliberate. "Kellen and I have been planning this for months. He'll back me up, no questions. I'm going to make it look like Braxton's the one abusing me emotionally. I know I'll have no trouble convincing the lawyer, especially with the things he's said in private. The house, the money, it'll all be mine. All I have to do is keep playing the role of the perfect wife for a little longer. Once I'm free, I'll finally have control. He won't know what hit him." My hands were shaking as I held the recorder. The world tilted beneath me. Betrayal, anger, confusion. They all rushed in like a flood, drowning me. Delaney. My wife. She had been planning this. Behind my back, she had been building a case to ruin me, to take everything I had. My heart pounded in my ears as I replayed the recording, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. I felt like I was choking on the realization. She'd been planning to frame me, to tear apart everything I thought we had. And she wasn't alone. Kellen Rhodes's. Who the hell was he? I took a step back, the room spinning. I needed answers, but I knew I couldn't just confront her without solid proof. My fingers gripped the recorder tighter as I thought of my next move. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was the destruction of everything I had worked for. And now, I was going to have to fight back. I sat there for a long time, the voice recorder pressed tightly in my hands, my thoughts swirling in a chaotic storm. It was all coming together, and yet none of it made sense. Delaney, my wife, the woman I had trusted with everything, was planning to destroy me. The voice on the recording was calm, almost detached as it described a carefully laid out plan, one that involved an affair, manipulation, and a plan to ruin me financially and emotionally. But hearing it was one thing. It wasn't enough. I needed more proof. I needed everything to unravel before I could confront her. I felt my pulse racing as I set the recorder down on the counter, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. I needed to get my head straight, think through the next steps. There was no way I could confront her just yet, not without risking losing everything. She was already plotting to take it all. I needed a plan of my own. I grabbed my phone and dialed the first number that came to mind. "Marcus, hey," I said when he answered, keeping my voice low. "I need a favor, something big. Can you meet me tonight?" Marcus Reed was my best friend, the kind of guy who always had your back, no questions asked. He had a knack for getting things done, and right now, I needed him to help me get the dirt I needed to fight back. "Yeah, of course," Marcus said. "You all right?" "Not even close," I muttered, my hands running through my hair. "I'll explain when I see you. I need you to dig into someone for me, Kellen Rodas." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by Marcus's voice, now laced with curiosity. "Rhodes? Who's that?" "Delaney's lover," I spat, the words tasting like bile. "I need everything you can find on him, where he's been, who he's been with, anything. I'm going to need leverage." "You got it. I'll dig into it tonight and get back to you tomorrow," he said, his tone firm. "Don't do anything stupid in the meantime, all right? You're gonna need all your wits for this." "I know," I said, glancing at the voice recorder once again. "Thanks, man. I'll see you soon." After the call ended, I paced the kitchen for a few more minutes, replaying Delaney's voice in my head. Kellen and I have been planning this for months. It echoed like a mantra, and every time it did, the anger inside me flared hotter. Months. She'd been lying to me for months, weaving this web of deceit while I thought everything was fine. I couldn't let her get away with this. I walked through the house, looking for any other signs, anything else that could give me more to go on. The house, which once felt like home, now felt foreign. It was like I was stepping through the wreckage of my own life. I turned toward our guest room. It had always been a bit of an afterthought, a place we used when we had visitors. The bed was never made, and the room had a certain coldness to it. I never thought twice about it, but now it felt like a treasure chest, waiting to be unlocked. I went over to the dresser, fingers running along the surface. The familiar jewelry box, still there, but now completely empty, caught my eye again. How had I missed that? I opened the top drawer, pulling out a few random items until something heavy caught my attention. A thick envelope wedged under the clothes. I hesitated for a moment, then slid it out. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the handwriting on the front. Braxton's emotional abuse, case documents. My stomach churned as I ripped open the envelope and pulled out a series of papers. They were mostly legal documents, some from lawyers, others from therapists. As I flipped through them, I realized what I was holding. Delaney had been gathering evidence to prove I was emotionally abusive. The papers contained notes from therapy sessions, some of which I didn't even remember us having, detailing various incidents from our past. They were all skewed, twisted to fit the narrative she was crafting. She had been preparing for this, preparing to destroy me in court and make me look like the bad guy. My hand shook as I read through more pages. It wasn't just therapy notes. There were financial statements, documents that showed her attempts to drain our joint accounts, plans to sell assets and hide money. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was an act of war. As I processed everything, my phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Delaney. "I'll be home around 8. Have you eaten? I'm working late. Don't wait for me if you're tired." I stared at the text for a long moment. There it was, her perfect, polite mask. "Don't wait for me." She didn't even care. She didn't know it, but the moment I read that text, everything shifted. It wasn't just about a betrayal anymore. It was about survival. I had everything I needed. Marcus was working on Kellen, and now I had the proof of Delaney's plan. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I wasn't going to sit by while she took everything I worked for, manipulated me, and used me as a stepping stone to get ahead. I walked back to the kitchen, pulled out my phone, and snapped a picture of the documents. I couldn't trust Delaney to leave me anything, but I could make damn sure I had something to fight with. The evidence was already stacking up, and I was going to use it to make sure she didn't get away with this. That night, when Delaney walked through the door, I'd be ready. I had no choice. The fight had already begun. The days that followed were a blur of quiet tension. I spent my time carefully laying the groundwork, gathering more evidence, and putting my plan into motion. I couldn't confront Delaney yet, not until I had enough, but I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I'd worked for without a fight. Marcus had come through for me. He'd found Kellen Rodis's, my wife's lover, and everything he dug up made my blood boil. Kellen was a nobody, a con man who had bounced between small jobs and even smaller lies. His history was a mess of financial troubles, failed relationships, and a criminal record that was just clean enough to keep him out of prison. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he was now in bed with my wife, trying to take everything from me. Marcus had also confirmed something else. Delaney and Kellen had been meeting frequently, and it wasn't just about a secret affair. They were plotting. They had plans, real plans, to destroy my life and get away with it. I had to move carefully, methodically. One wrong move, and I could lose everything. So, I started watching Delaney closely. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was the enemy, and I had to treat her as such. For the next few days, I kept a low profile, watching for any signs that she was starting to suspect anything. I installed hidden cameras around the house, discreetly placed in places I knew she frequented. There was one in the living room, another in the kitchen, and one in our bedroom. It was risky, but it was the only way I could capture the kind of proof I needed to confront her. The worst part? She didn't suspect a thing. She played her part perfectly, coming home every night at the same time, acting like everything was fine. She'd smile, ask how my day was, and tell me about the latest project at work. It was like we were living in two different worlds, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of it every time she kissed me goodnight or slipped into bed next to me. I didn't know who she was anymore. Was she the woman I married, or was she this cold, calculating person who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed? One afternoon, I decided to follow her. She'd mentioned going to the gym, but I knew she wasn't just there for a workout. I'd seen the way she dressed, tight leggings, a tank top that hugged her curves just right, like she was trying to impress someone. I wasn't about to let Kellen slip under my radar. I grabbed my keys, slipping out of the house before she could notice. I kept a safe distance, watching her from across the parking lot as she entered the gym. But she wasn't alone. A few minutes later, Kellen pulled up. I could see him leaning against the side of his car, waiting for her, a sly grin on his face. They talked for a moment, before slipping inside the gym together. The whole thing felt like a gut punch. They were bold, too bold. I snapped a few pictures with my phone, making sure I had evidence. I wasn't sure how I would use it yet, but I knew I would need it. No matter how carefully they thought they were covering their tracks, I was going to be one step ahead. The next day I met Marcus at a local bar. I hadn't told him about my surveillance yet, but it was time to fill him in. I needed his help more than ever. Marcus was already at the back booth when I walked in. He greeted me with a nod, his face serious. "What's going on?" he asked, gesturing for me to sit. "I've got more than enough to take Delaney down," I said quietly, sliding into the seat across from him. "She's been meeting with Kellen, planning something, and I need to make sure we've got all the pieces before I confront her." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You think she's going to flip on you, use you as the fall guy?" I nodded. "She's already got a plan in place to frame me for emotional abuse. She's got therapists involved, and she's already got her lawyer lined up." Marcus swore under his breath. "Shit. So, what's the next move?" "I'm getting the rest of the evidence," I said, leaning forward. "But I need to track Kellen. I need to know where he's been, who he's been talking to, everything. I can't just take her word for it when she tries to spin this." "I'll get on it," Marcus said, his expression hardening. "You just focus on keeping her calm. If she catches wind of this, it'll all fall apart." "Right." I took a deep breath. "I'll keep watching her. But I'm going to need more, Marcus. I need every scrap of information on Kellen, his background, his connections, anything that can help me expose him." "You got it," he said, nodding. I slid a few bills across the table, meeting his eyes. "You're doing me a huge favor. I don't know what I'd do without you." He waved it off. "We're in this together. Just don't do anything stupid, all right?" "I won't," I said, standing up. "But I need this to end. I can't let her do this to me." Marcus gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "We'll get it all. Just keep your head cool." I walked out of the bar feeling a little lighter, but but still weighed down by the enormity of the situation. It wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. It was about survival. If Delaney and Kellen thought they could take everything from me, they had another thing coming. It was time to make sure they couldn't hide from the truth anymore. I was done being the fool. This fight wasn't over yet, and I was going to make damn sure I came out on top. I spent the next few days playing the role of the calm, collected husband. Delaney continued her act of the perfect wife, going about her usual routine, pretending like nothing had changed, but I could feel it. The tension building, simmering beneath the surface, like a storm waiting to break. It was the quiet moments when the truth seemed to hang the heaviest, when I found myself wondering if she was still playing me, or if I was just the last person to know what was really going on in my own life. By the end of the week, I had what I needed, enough evidence to expose Delaney's betrayal and her plans. I still didn't have everything, but I had a solid foundation. The surveillance footage of Kellen and Delaney meeting at the gym, the pictures from my spy mission, and the voice recording that started it all, these were the things I could use to finally confront her. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed more than just the evidence. I needed backup. I got a call that evening from someone I never expected. "Braxton, I need to talk to you." Jessica Martinez's voice crackled through the phone. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. Jessica was the cleaning lady at the gym where Delaney and Kellen often met. I'd never really gotten to know her well, but she always seemed like one of those people who knew everything that was going on around her without ever really being involved. "What's going on, Jessica?" I asked, my mind already racing. "You all right?" "I'm fine, but I think you need to know something," she said, her tone hesitant but urgent. "I know who Kellen is, Braxton, and I know what he's been up to. I don't know if I should be saying anything, but I can't just let him hurt you like this." I took a deep breath. "What do you mean? What do you know about him?" I'm not supposed to be talking to you about this, but I can't stand by anymore," she said. "Kellen's a manipulator, Braxton. He's been doing this to women for years, using them for money, for connections. He's had several women on the side, but he's been so slick no one notices. I've seen him around the gym, but I've heard more than I ever should have." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just the affair. Kellen wasn't just some random guy Delaney was having an affair with. He was a professional predator, using his charm and lies to destroy people's lives. And now, it was my life on the line. "What do you mean he's been using women?" I asked, my voice low. "I know about the other women he's been with," Jessica said, her voice shaking. "I've seen them come and go from the gym, and I know he's always been looking for someone with money. He's been doing this for a long time, trying to secure his future by using women to get ahead." I clenched my fist. This was bigger than I thought. Kellen wasn't just an opportunist. He was a predator who had already used others to climb the ladder. And now he had set his sights on me, my wife, and everything I had built. "Do you have proof?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I can get you proof," Jessica said quickly. "I have photos, Braxton. I've seen him meeting with women, and I've heard some of his conversations with them. I can send you everything I've got, but I'll need your help. I can't do this alone. He's dangerous." I exhaled slowly, running my hand through my hair. "All right, send me what you have, but we need to move fast. I'm going to need everything, Jessica. I can't let this guy get away with this." "I know. I'll send it over tonight. Just be careful. Kellen's not someone to take lightly. He's a lot smarter than you think. He's been planning something with Delaney for a while now." The line went quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing in and out, clearly nervous. "I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he pays for this," I said firmly. "Thanks, Jessica. I won't forget this." "Just make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else," she replied quietly. "Good luck, Braxton." I hung up the phone, my mind racing. Jessica's words felt like a lifeline. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't in this fight alone, but I still had to move carefully. Kellen wasn't some random affair partner. He was a man who used women like tools to get what he wanted, and he was about to pay for it. As the night wore on, I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for the photos and documents Jessica promised to send. I couldn't help but think about Delaney. Everything she'd said, everything she'd done, it had all been a lie. She had been planning this behind my back, and now the pieces were falling into place. My phone buzzed, and I saw a message from Jessica. It was everything I needed. The photos, the texts, the receipts. Kellen's entire web of lies was laid out in front of me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. But there was something else that gnawed at the back of my mind. Delaney. She hadn't let on that she knew I was getting close. She was still playing her part. But how long could she keep up the act? I wasn't about to let her get away with this, no matter how perfect her mask seemed. The game was changing, and I wasn't backing down. I was done being the fool. This was my fight now. And it wasn't just for my life. It was for the truth. And I was going to make sure that nothing and no one could tear me down again. The next day, I called Marcus. "It's time," I said, my voice steady. "We've got everything we need. We move tonight." I could feel the weight of the day pressing down on me. The house, still eerily quiet, felt like a prison. Delaney was due home in a couple of hours, and I knew that this was it. The moment when everything would change. The moment I would confront her, face to face, with the truth. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't dreading the confrontation. I was prepared. I had all the evidence I needed. Jessica's photos and documents were on my phone. The voice recording of Delaney plotting her betrayal, the surveillance footage of her and Kellen, the financial records, and the emotional abuse case she'd been trying to build, all of it was ready to be laid out. As the clock ticked closer to 8, I felt a calm settle over me. This was it. It wasn't just about exposing her lies, it was about taking back control of my life, my future. I could hear Delaney's car pulling into the driveway, the familiar sound of the engine sputtering to a stop just outside the front door. My heart rate quickened, but I held my ground, standing still in the living room. The house, once our home, now felt like a stage set for an inevitable showdown. She opened the door and stepped inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She paused when she saw me standing there, an unreadable expression on her face. I saw the flash of confusion, maybe even a little surprise, but she quickly masked it with her usual calm demeanor. "Braxton," she said, her voice smooth, the tone that she always used when she wanted to sound casual, unaffected. "You're still up?" I didn't respond immediately. I studied her, taking in the way she looked, so familiar, yet completely foreign. I had been married to this woman for years, shared my life with her, and yet, in that moment, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. "I think we need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. There was no going back now. This was the moment I had been preparing for. Her eyes narrowed, just a fraction, and I could see the slight twitch of her hand as she set down her bag. "About what?" she asked, her voice laced with the same practiced sweetness she'd always used. I stepped forward, the air thick with tension. "About everything," I said. "About the affair, about the plans you've been making behind my back, about Kellen, about how you've been trying to destroy me for months." Delaney's face froze for a moment, her eyes flickering with something, guilt maybe? But it was gone in an instant. She masked it quickly, straightening her posture, putting on that same perfect facade she always wore. "You're overreacting, Braxton," she said softly, though her voice trembled just a little. "You're tired. You've been working too hard. Maybe you're just stressed. You don't have all the facts." I held up my phone, showing her the pictures Jessica had sent. Of Kellen, of her, together. The private conversations between them. The receipts for things I knew I hadn't bought. "I have the facts, Delaney," I said, my voice steady. "I've been tracking everything. The meetings, the lies, the plans. I know what you've been doing. And I know why you've been doing it." Her eyes flickered for just a moment. There it was, the briefest flash of panic. But she quickly recovered, her face slipping back into its calm, controlled mask. "You're being paranoid," she said, taking a step back. "You don't know what you're talking about. Kellen is just a friend. We've been talking about business, nothing more." "Stop lying," I said, my voice rising slightly now. "Stop pretending. I heard you, Delaney. I heard the recording. You and Kellen plotting everything. How you're going to frame me for emotional abuse, take everything we have, and leave me with nothing. How you've been planning to destroy my life so you can get control of everything." Her face went pale. She stumbled backward, her lips parting as if to speak, but the words caught in her throat. I watched her, waiting for her to try and lie her way out of it, to spin some excuse, some justification for what she had done. But instead, she looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks, and I saw it, the coldness in her eyes. The truth was written there, in the way she held herself. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. She was in control. "You don't understand, Braxton," she said, her voice low now, almost sad. You were never enough. You were just convenient. I needed more than what you could give me. I needed someone who could help me get ahead, someone who could give me everything I wanted. And Kellen is everything you'll never be. He understands me. He sees me for who I really am. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything we'd been through, after all the years together, she was standing there telling me, without a shred of remorse, that I was never enough for her. You've been planning this for months, haven't you? I said, stepping closer, unable to keep the anger from my voice now. Every time you told me you were working late, every time you pretended everything was fine, you were planning to leave me. You were planning to take everything. Her lips curled into a thin smile. You don't get it, do you? I've been playing this game for years. I'm just smarter than you. You thought I was the perfect wife, the perfect partner, but I was always working towards something more. And now I have it. I have Kellen, and I have everything I need. I shook my head in disbelief, the sting of her words hitting harder than anything I had ever imagined. You're a monster, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I gave you everything, and this is what you do? This is how you repay me? She didn't flinch. You were never going to give me what I wanted, Braxton, she said coldly. And now, I'm finally free. I stood there for a moment, my body shaking with the weight of everything I was feeling, betrayal, anger, disbelief. This was it. Delaney wasn't the woman I thought she was. She had played me, used me, and now she was walking away without a care in the world. But I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. You may think you've won, I said, my voice steady again, but you haven't. I'm not going anywhere, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. She raised an eyebrow, a smug smile playing at the corners of her lips. Good luck with that, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But you'll see. I always win in the end. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the silence of our home, a home that no longer felt like a place of safety. No. This was no longer our home. It was my battleground, and I was going to fight for everything I had left. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The day had arrived. The day Delaney and Kellen had planned my accident. The day they thought they were going to take me down without a second thought. I had anticipated this moment for weeks. I had known something was coming, that this was the point where Delaney and Kellen would make their final move. Everything they'd been planning had led to this. I couldn't let it happen. Not without a fight. The construction site, the one I'd worked on for years, had been chosen as the perfect location for the accident. It was a place I knew well, a place I had helped build, and that's exactly why they chose it, because they thought I would be too comfortable, too unsuspecting. They had planned to stage it like an accident on the job, one that would make it look like I had slipped or fallen, something that could be written off as a workplace tragedy. The plan was simple. Hurt me enough to make it look real, then call it in and walk away while they raked in the benefits. But I was one step ahead. I had already alerted the police, told them exactly what was about to happen and where. My private investigator had been watching Kellen's every move, confirming his presence at the site. And, of course, I had my own hidden cameras on the job site. They'd been there all along, recording everything, making sure there was no way Delaney and Kellen could get away with it. I wasn't about to let them win. I watched the clock as it ticked closer to the time when everything was supposed to unfold. Delaney had texted me earlier, the usual "I'm working late" message. I wasn't surprised. She was already trying to cover her tracks, trying to convince me that nothing was wrong, that everything was just fine. But I wasn't fooled. At 2 p.m., I received a text from Marcus. Kellen and Danny are at the site. They're preparing the accident, ready when you are. Danny Troy, another one of Delaney's accomplices. He had been working with Kellen for months, helping him keep everything quiet. The two of them had been working together to set me up, and I was about to make sure they'd both pay for it. I took a deep breath and grabbed my jacket. It was time to go. I had been to the site early that morning to set up, laying the groundwork for the surveillance, making sure everything was in place. Now, it was all about executing the plan. I made my way to the construction site, keeping a low profile, blending in with the workers. I didn't want anyone to notice me. As I walked through the site, I could see Kellen talking to Danny near the far end. They didn't notice me. It was just as I had planned. The timing had to be perfect. I couldn't risk being seen too early, but I also couldn't let them go through with it. I watched as Kellen looked over at Danny, giving him a nod. It was happening. I reached for my phone and sent the signal to the police. It's time. Within minutes, I saw the familiar blue and red lights flash in the distance. My heart beat faster now, not with fear, but with certainty. They thought they could pull this off, but they didn't realize that I had already won. I watched them for a moment longer as they set up their accident. Kellen seemed to be giving Danny instructions on where to position the tools, making sure everything would fall into place. But I knew exactly how they were going to try and frame me. I moved into position, hidden from their view, but within perfect sight of the cameras I had set up earlier. The police were on their way, and I had the evidence I needed to make sure they couldn't get away with it. I waited. The tension in the air was palpable. Every moment felt like it could be the one that tipped everything in my favor. My breath slowed as I focused on the job ahead. I wasn't just watching them. I was watching everything. I needed to make sure I could use their own plans against them. Suddenly, I saw Kellen move toward one of the scaffolds. Danny followed close behind. They were in position. I held my breath, waiting for the exact moment they were going to make their move. Just as Kellen reached for a tool near the edge, I saw Danny approach from behind, his hands outstretched. He was going to push me, make it look like an accident, but I was ready. I took a quick step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Now I sprang into action, stepping into their line of sight at just the right moment. Danny barely had time to react before I knocked the tool from his hands, sending it clattering to the ground. Kellen spun around, his eyes wide with surprise. But it was too late. The police were already pulling up to the site, their sirens blaring. "Freeze!" one of the officers yelled as several more got out of the patrol cars surrounding Kellen and Danny. I watched as Kellen's face twisted with disbelief, his plan unraveling in front of him. Danny's eyes darted around, trying to figure out what had gone wrong, but they both knew the game was up. The officers moved quickly, cuffing them both before they could even try to run. Kellen attempted to talk his way out of it, but there was no use. The cameras had captured everything, his conversations with Delaney, his plans to stage the accident, everything. I stood still, watching it all unfold in front of me. The weight of it all started to lift, but the job wasn't finished. Not yet. There was still one more person to deal with. I turned away from the scene, heading back to my truck, my mind already turning over what was next. It wasn't just about the takedown. It was about showing Delaney that she couldn't get away with this. She had thought she could ruin me, but she had underestimated me. And now, she would pay for everything. The police had everything they needed. Kellen and Danny were going to face the consequences. But Delaney? She wasn't getting away so easily. I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. Tonight, I'd make sure she knew the game was over. The tension in the air was thick when I arrived home. I had just left the construction site, watching as Kellen and Danny were arrested, their plans falling apart in front of their eyes. But that was only part of the plan. Now, it was time for the final act. I couldn't just let Delaney walk away from this, not after everything she'd done. I had the evidence. I had the proof, and it was time to confront her. As I stepped inside, the familiar quiet house greeted me. It was almost eerie, how everything felt so still, as though nothing had changed. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Delaney was sitting in the living room, her back turned to me as she flipped through a magazine. Her hair was done up in the same perfect style she always wore, and her face held the same calm, controlled expression. If I didn't know better, I would have thought she had no idea that her whole world was about to crash down around her. I stood in the doorway, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. I had played her game for too long, pretending like I didn't know what was going on. But now the tables had turned. Now it was my turn to call the shots. "Delaney," I said, my voice low and controlled. She didn't flinch, didn't even look up from the magazine. What is it, Braxton?" Her voice was calm, like she was still pretending that nothing was wrong. I stepped forward, my jaw tightening. "I think you know exactly what this is about," I said, the weight of my words hanging in the air. She set the magazine down slowly, finally looking at me. "I don't know what you're talking about." She tried to put on that same innocent look, but I saw right through it. There was nothing innocent about this woman anymore. I pulled out my phone, holding up the pictures Jessica had sent me. The ones that showed Kellen and Delaney together, meeting in secret, talking, plotting. The ones where they had been discussing their plans to ruin my life. Delaney's eyes flickered to the photos, and I saw the briefest flash of panic in her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. "Braxton," she started, her voice shaky now, "this is just misunderstandings. You don't know the whole story. I tossed the photos on the coffee table. You want to try me with that excuse, after everything? You and Kellen were going to frame me for emotional abuse, take everything I had, and walk away like nothing ever happened. Do you think I'm stupid? Delaney opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. And it wasn't just that, was it? I walked toward the dining room, where the legal documents I had found, the ones she had been using to set me up, sat in plain view. I grabbed them and tossed them in front of her. I found these too. You had it all planned out. The fake therapy sessions, the fabricated accusations. You were going to destroy me. And for what? She stared at the documents, her face pale now, her lips trembling as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Braxton, I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, her voice almost pleading. I didn't want to be stuck anymore. I felt trapped. Trapped? I scoffed. You've been living in a golden cage, Delaney. You had everything. Everything, and you still wanted more. You didn't care about me. You cared about what I could give you. And when you realized you weren't going to get any more from me, you decided to take it all. Her shoulders slumped, the guilt now clear in her eyes. I was just trying to make things better. You thought you could use me, I interrupted. You thought you could destroy everything I built, make me the villain, and get away with it. Well, you were wrong. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, as if she were waiting for some kind of reprieve, but I had nothing left to give her. Not after what she had done. I've contacted the police, I said, my voice cold. Kellen and Danny are going to pay for what they tried to do, but this isn't over yet. You've got a lot of explaining to do. I'm making sure the authorities know exactly what you've been up to. Her face went white. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I could see the realization hitting her. She wasn't going to get away with this. There was no escape now. I walked toward the front door, pausing just before I stepped out of the room. You've made your bed, Delaney. Now you're going to lie in it. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, frozen, watching me walk away. I left the house knowing that the hard part was only just beginning. I had done what needed to be done, but this wasn't just about Delaney or Kellen anymore. It was about the future. It was about reclaiming my life. I got into my truck and drove away, feeling the weight of the past few months finally lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't the fool she had thought I was. But there was one last thing I had to do. I needed to make sure Delaney would never hurt me, or anyone else, again. And I was going to make sure that nothing she did would go unpunished. The fight was over, and I had won. But the war was just beginning. The days after the confrontation felt surreal. The tension that had been suffocating me for months finally started to ease. But a part of me still couldn't believe everything that had happened. The house felt quieter, emptier, but somehow lighter. I no longer had to pretend. No longer had to wake up each morning wondering if today would be the day Delaney's betrayal would come crashing down on me. She was gone. Kellen and Danny were behind bars, their plans unraveling in the most public way possible. Delaney had been arrested too, her conspiracy to commit murder, her manipulation of the law, all of it coming to light. The police had everything they needed, and now the truth was out. But even with the weight lifted, the truth wasn't comforting. It was hard to shake the feeling of being deceived by someone I had loved, someone I had trusted with my life. Delaney wasn't just a cheater, she was a manipulator, a woman who had plotted to destroy everything I had worked for, all for her own gain. I spent the next few days at the office trying to keep my mind occupied. The bar, my pride and joy, was still running smoothly. It was one of the few things that hadn't been touched by the chaos of Delaney's betrayal, and for that, I was grateful. It gave me a space to breathe, to think, and most importantly, to reflect on everything that had happened. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office, staring out at the city as the sun dipped below the skyline. The soft hum of the bar's ambiance reached me from downstairs, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of peace. I had taken control. The truth had come out, and Delaney was facing the consequences of her actions. But there was still something in me that felt hollow. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the messages. The one from Marcus stood out. Braxton, just wanted to check in. You okay? You did the right thing. You're stronger than you think. I stared at the message for a while before typing a response. I'm hanging in there, but it's going to take time, you know? It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about healing, about picking up the pieces of my life and figuring out what came next. I set the phone down and stood up, stretching. The silence of my office felt almost suffocating now. The world outside my door was moving, evolving, but I felt like I was standing still. I hadn't talked to Hadley, my sister, in days. She had been supportive from the start, but there was still a wall between us that I couldn't shake. After everything that had happened with Delaney, I wasn't sure if I was ready to talk about it with anyone. It was easier to keep things inside, to deal with it on my own, but I knew that wasn't going to help in the long run. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my jacket and walked out of the office. The familiar hum of the bar greeted me as I descended the stairs. The staff greeted me with smiles, their usual warmth filling the room. It was a relief to be surrounded by people who didn't know the details of my personal life, who just saw me as the guy who owned the bar, the one who made sure the drinks were cold and the atmosphere was always welcoming. The night was quiet, the usual crowd sipping cocktails and chatting casually. But as I stood behind the bar, watching the world continue on around me, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. It wasn't just Delaney. It was everything that had led up to this point. The years of putting my family first, of helping everyone else while sacrificing my own needs. The moments where I had swallowed my pride and kept my mouth shut just to keep the peace. The times I let myself believe that the people I loved actually cared about me the way I cared about them. But that wasn't the case, was it? I had spent so long trying to make others happy, to be the perfect son, the perfect husband, the perfect friend. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what I wanted, what I needed. My phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. "Hadley, we need to talk. I'm here if you need me. Just don't shut me out, okay?" I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. It was time to talk to her. It was time to stop running from the truth. I stepped out of the bar, taking a deep breath as I walked into the cool evening air. My sister lived just a few blocks away, and I found myself walking to her apartment, the city lights flickering around me. It was a walk I had taken countless times before, but tonight felt different. There was something final about it, something that marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. When I reached her door, I knocked twice, my heart pounding in my chest. Hadley opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Braxton," she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. I nodded, stepping into her apartment. "I've been meaning to talk to you," I said, my voice rough. She gestured for me to sit down, and I did, sinking into the couch. Hadley sat beside me, her gaze steady, waiting for me to speak. "I'm sorry," I said after a long silence. "I should have reached out sooner. I've just been trying to figure everything out." She placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch warm and comforting. "You don't have to apologize, Brax. I'm here for you. But I think you need to talk about it. Everything that happened. I know you're hurting." I let out a slow breath, nodding. "I thought I had everything under control, you know? But I never saw it coming with Delaney. She was my wife. I trusted her." "I know," Hadley said quietly. "But you're not alone in this, Brax. I know you think you've been through it all alone, but you don't have to do this by yourself." I looked up at her, her words hitting deeper than I expected. "I've spent so long trying to protect everyone else that I forgot about myself. I'm not sure who I am without all that." "You're still you," Hadley said firmly, squeezing my shoulder. "And that's enough." I sat back, finally allowing myself to relax, the weight of the past few days lifting a little more. "I don't know what comes next," I admitted. "But I'm starting to think I don't have to have it all figured out right now." "You don't," Hadley agreed, her voice soft but sure. "You've done enough. It's time for you to take care of yourself, Braxton." I smiled at her, the first genuine smile I'd had in a long time. She was right. It wasn't over, but it was a new beginning, and I wasn't alone anymore. As we sat there, talking about everything and nothing, I realized something. This wasn't just about recovering from a betrayal. It was about finding myself again. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. Not ever again. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could face it. And maybe, just maybe, I could start rebuilding. Not just my life, but who I was. It was time to move on. 6 months had passed. 6 months since the dust had settled, since Delaney had been arrested, and the world I had built with her had come crashing down. I had expected the aftermath to feel like a long, drawn-out war, but instead, The peace came quietly, almost too quietly. I stood outside my new home, looking at the house I had bought just a few months ago. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Mine without anyone else's influence, without anyone's control. The renovations had been finished a few weeks ago, and now it was my space. No more fake smiles, no more lies. The house felt like a symbol of my freedom. It had taken a while for me to adjust, but every time I stepped through the front door, I felt a weight lifting. It wasn't just the physical change in surroundings. It was everything. The anger, the betrayal, the years I had spent putting others before myself. It was all in the past. I'd spent months working on rebuilding my life, my business, my relationships with family, and most importantly, my own sense of self. I'd taken the time to do things I had put off for years, catching up with friends, enjoying quiet nights in, and, for once, doing things just for me. I was on my way to the grocery store when I saw Lois Draper, the neighbor who had once overheard the commotion from inside my house, walking toward me with a warm smile on her face. "Braxton!" Lois called out, her hands wrapped around a bag of fresh produce. She was in her usual oversized cardigan and comfortable shoes, the same casual charm she always carried. "Lois, hey," I replied, offering a small wave. She stopped in front of me, smiling brightly. "I've been meaning to stop by and say how much I love your new place. It really suits you. Very cozy, very you." I smiled back, feeling a sense of pride in her compliment. "Thanks, Lois. It's been a work in progress, but I'm finally feeling like it's home." "You deserve it," she said, her tone warm and genuine. She paused, then lowered her voice slightly, her eyes softening. "I heard what happened. I want you to know that I'm so sorry you went through that. You always seemed like such a nice man, and for someone to treat you like that, it just isn't right." The sympathy in her eyes hit me harder than I expected. It had been months since anyone had truly acknowledged what I'd gone through, and hearing her say those words felt like a weight being lifted off my chest. Lois had always been the type of neighbor to mind her own business, but it was clear she hadn't been blind to what had happened. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "It was a rough time, but I'm doing all right now. It was tough, but I'm learning to move forward." Lois gave me a small smile. "I'm glad to hear that. People like you don't deserve to be treated that way. You've got a good heart." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded again, the weight of her kindness surprising me. For so long, I'd been surrounded by manipulation and betrayal, and it was only now, in the quiet aftermath, that I was starting to see what real support looked like. "Thank you, Lois," I said finally. "I appreciate that." She gave me a warm pat on the arm before continuing on her way, leaving me standing in front of my house, feeling a little lighter than I had just moments before. I walked into the grocery store, feeling the weight of the past still lingering, but in a different way now, less suffocating, more like a distant memory. I had taken steps to heal, to rebuild, and to start over. And each day it felt a little easier. As I walked the aisles, I thought about how far I had come. I had lost so much: trust, love, security. But I had also gained something invaluable: myself. And that was the one thing no one could ever take away from me. When I checked out and loaded my groceries into the truck, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to find a message from Jessica Martinez. Her name had become one I now associated with a quiet sense of gratitude. She had given me the proof I needed and helped bring everything to light. She had been a true ally in my fight, even if she had never expected to be. The message was simple: just checking in. "How are you doing?" I smiled and quickly typed a reply. "Doing good. Things are really starting to come together. Thanks again, Jessica. You were a huge help in all this." The reply came moments later. "Glad to hear it. Take care of yourself. You deserve it." I put the phone down, taking a deep breath as I backed out of the parking spot. For once, I didn't feel like I was running away from something. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next shoe to drop. I was free, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. As the weeks passed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. I spent more time at the bar, connecting with the community there. People were supportive, not because they pitied me, but because they saw me as who I truly was now. Not a man defined by betrayal, but by strength and resilience. I started dating again, tentatively at first, but as I met new people, I realized I wasn't the same man I used to be. I wasn't broken anymore. I was healing. One Saturday, about 6 months after everything had been resolved, I ran into Hadley at a coffee shop. She was smiling more, her usual air of concern replaced by a sense of peace. She had helped me through some of my darkest moments, and I could see now that she was finding her own way too. We sat together, talking about life, love, and everything in between. It felt good to have these conversations again. Genuine, real conversations where I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of 1,000 secrets. "Braxton," Hadley said, her voice softer than usual, "I'm proud of you. You've really come a long way." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Thanks, Hads. I'm proud of me too. It's been a long road, but I'm finally getting there." We both sat in silence for a moment, letting the conversation settle, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the past to catch up to me. It was the first time I truly believed that the best was yet to come. And as I walked out of that coffee shop, heading back to my new life, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what came next. The past was behind me. My future finally was in my hands.